Chapter 17. Lightning Strikes. When we got there, it turned out as Dad said. The crowds around the London Eye were thinner than yesterday. A large tract of cumulonimbus cloud had rolled in. The area of low pressure was approaching. It was 990 millibars and falling, I estimated. Visibility was only fair. Getting tickets didn't take long. Soon we were in the line for the ramp up to the Eye. We got to the point where we'd parted with Salim yesterday. A security man checked us over with a handheld machine, like a giant bubble-blowing holder. Then we walked up the ramp. It was a zigzag, a back-to-front Z. We boarded the moving pod, along with a group of 8 foreign teenagers and a tired-looking mum with a folded-up buggy, her baby, and her 2 older boys. We began to rise. I counted how many we were as we moved anti-clockwise from 6 to 5 o'clock. 14. I decided not to count the baby, as it was unable to walk around or to look at the view, and because it was too small to remember the experience. Yesterday, in Salim's pod, I'd counted 21. I drifted over to the side of the pod where nobody else was standing. I watched the other passengers. They looked out, turned, chatted in quiet voices, and clicked cameras. Kat came over and stood beside me. "I did it," she whispered. "Did what?" I said. "Shush. I dropped the film in at the chemist's. By the time we get back, it will be developed." I thought of the 18 shots of the back garden and the 18 other shots, our last link to Salim. "That is good, Kat." Dad joined us. "What a view," he said. "Look at how tiny the cars are." "They're like abacus beads," Kat said, "going left and right." I looked down, but I couldn't say I'd ever seen abacus beads like that. Dad pointed south. "If you had binoculars, you could make out our street, maybe even our house." "Typical," Kat said. "You come up here just to see what stares you in the face every day." Dad laughed. "I've never seen where we live from this vantage before. There's the barracks, looking almost handsome, if you can imagine it cleaned up, maybe. And there's Guy's Tower. And there's a shopping centre. You can see its red roof." "Come and see the Houses of Parliament, Dad." Kat pulled him over to the other side of the pod. I took Dad's place at the southeast side and looked out, but without taking in what I was seeing. We got to 12 o'clock. Visibility decreased further. The Thames estuary dissolved into cloud. I thought of the Mary Celeste, a ghost ship with no crew, sailing over the horizon. I thought of the last dodo dying on a remote rock. I thought of Lord Lucan standing on a cliff, deciding whether or not to throw himself off. I thought of a chain of gods, each having been created by the next, vanishing into infinity, the great vast void. I thought of the boy on the slab, the young boy with the bruises and dirty fingernails, the boy who wasn't Salim. "Where are you, Salim?" I wondered. Then suddenly, it was as if I became Salim. I felt his laughing presence inside me, almost like a ghost, while I stood looking out. I tried to imagine what he'd have done, alone among the strangers in his pod. Would he have chatted to somebody? Would he have stayed quietly in a corner? I divided into 2, with the Ted half asking the Salim half what had happened. But the ghost of Salim, like the dodos, lords, and crew of the Mary Celeste, vanished before we reached 9 o'clock. An announcement came on from a speaker in the corner of the pod, suggesting that we all group together facing northeastwards towards the spiral staircase to pose for the souvenir photo. "Shall we?" said Dad. "Yes, let's," said Kat. Kat and Dad gathered on one side of the pod with the other passengers, while I stayed out at the edge, half posing, half looking at the others posing. The camera flashed. The pod came down. A young man with a London Eye t-shirt, a member of staff, stood at the door beckoning us to come out. The others filed out first. Dad and I were next. But Kat hung back, her eyes darting around. She crouched down by the seats, but the man came in and shooed her out, then picked up a piece of litter that the woman holding the baby had dropped and got out himself. "What was that all about?" Dad said. I nearly said, "Theory number 1 being disproved," but remembered how Mum had reacted to theory number 8. "I thought I dropped something," Kat said. "Well, shake a leg," Dad said. Shake a leg is Dad's favorite way of saying hurry up. although if you tried to run and shake a leg at the same time, you would fall over. Kat nudged me. We both realized the same thing at the same time. You couldn't stay on for another go. Exit, enter, exit, enter. It was a smooth operation. The way out led past the souvenir photo booth, close to where we had said we'd meet Salim. There were several television-like screens with different shots of each passenger load. Our one was number 2903. There was Dad, there was Kat, there was the mum and her 2 boys and her baby. The teenage tourists were bunched around them, grinning and waving. You could only see my shoulder and ear sticking out on the right behind everybody else.
Ted's cut off, and I look a fright, Dad said. But you look all right, Kat.
Kat had her arms folded, and her hair was tied in what girls call a top knot. Her skinny, bony face jutted out. With her tilted chin and dark eyebrows, she seemed sharper somehow, as if she was more in focus than other people round her, or more real. You couldn't help noticing her, whether you were looking for her or not. Maybe that's what being pretty meant, I thought. God, she said, my hair looks icky. Dad bought the shot anyway. Then we left the eye and walked along the river. The Thames was flat and brown. The pleasure boats cruised along with hardly any passengers. You could hear aircraft but not see them. The blanket of cloud grew thicker. I kept looking out for Salim. Whenever we passed a boy of about his build with dark hair, I'd stare. But when we drew close, it was never him. Dad stopped to look out across the water. He pointed out 2 cormorants that dipped and dived into the water, disappearing for ages, then reappearing 10 meters or more from where they'd gone down. Is Salim like the cormorants, Dad?
Sorry, Ted?
Will he reappear eventually, like they do? Maybe not where he disappeared, but somewhere else? Dad didn't answer straight away. He looked downstream, with his lips turned down, which meant he was sad. Perhaps he was thinking of the boy on the slab, the boy who might have been Salim, but wasn't.
I certainly hope Salim is like the cormorants, Ted.
We crossed the river to the Embankment Gardens and had sandwiches in the park cafe. When we'd finished, we walked around the beds of colourful flowers. Then, just as I'd predicted that morning, a thunderstorm started. First rain dripped, then splattered. There was a thunderclap. The instability in the upper atmosphere erupted. I thought of theory number 5, spontaneous combustion. If thunder was possible, why not that?
Good thing we're not on the eye now,
Dad said. Lightning flashed. 10 seconds later, it thundered again. Dad, I said, the storm is 3 kilometers away. Even if it was near it, your chance of being struck is approximately 1 in 3 million. We dashed for the underground station. By now it was raining cats and dogs, which is the strangest expression of all, but my personal favorite. When I imagine cats and dogs coming from the sky, I see white fluffy kittens and Dalmatian puppies. Then it turned to hail. The lightning and thunder were 4 seconds apart. 1,200 meters, I said. And it's sheet lightning, which means, shut up, Ted, Kat said. She had her jacket collar up over her head. I'm soaked. Dad looked at his watch.
3 o'clock. No calls on the mobile, so no news.
Let's go home.
Okay, Kat, we'll call it a day.
We went down into the underground. By the time we were back up on street level, the storm had moved away. The rain had stopped. The pavements ran with moisture. It was a very localized storm system, I said. Dad, said Kat, do you mind if we stop by the shopping centre again? I want to get a present for Auntie Glo, some bath oil to help her relax. Dad's lips went right up.
That's a great idea, kitten.
We waited as Kat went into the chemist's again. She emerged with a plastic bottle of syrupy raspberry-coloured liquid. Dad unscrewed the lid, smelt it, and crinkled up his nose. This meant that he didn't think it smelled pleasant, but what he said was,
that should do nicely.
What he didn't see, but I did, was the top of a wallet of newly processed photos bulging from the pocket of Kat's fur-coloured jacket. Chapter 18. The Ninth Theory. When we got home, there was a smog in the living room caused by Aunt Gloria's cigarettes. A smog is technically a mixture of smoke, fog, and chemical fumes, but this was a mixture of smoke, smoke, and more smoke. Mum said there had been no news, but we already knew this because Dad's mobile phone had not rung. I tried to tell her and Aunt Gloria about our trip to the London Eye, but Kat started coughing and Dad said we had had a very pleasant walk by the river. Then Kat gave Aunt Gloria the bath oil, saying it was a present from both her and me, and when Aunt Gloria looked at the label, her lips went up. She said, "Thank you, Kat, and thank you, Ted," and added that it was the kind she'd used when Salim was little. "The little devil that he was," she said, "forever pinching it. He liked the bubbles, blowing them up, giggling when they burst." Then she started crying, and Mum told Kat and me to go upstairs. Upstairs, Kat got out the wallet of photos and flicked through them at a rate of 1 a second. I was very excited to see them, but she wouldn't let me. In 18 seconds, 18 pictures of our back garden and the washing and the shed were all over my duvet cover. When she got to the first 18 shots, the ones taken the morning of Salim's disappearance, she slowed down. I tried to look over her shoulder, but she jerked away. She went through them twice, then dropped them on the bed as if she was no longer interested. I picked them up and looked. "Just a set of stupid touristy shots," Kat said, "like any others." There were scenes of the Houses of Parliament, Lambeth Bridge and the Eye, from different angles. The best shot was the one Salim had taken of Kat and me on the Jubilee footbridge. It had Kat's face and mine close together, and behind us was half of the Eye and some bridge and river and sky. Kat was smiling. My head was off to one side and my eyes were looking upwards as if I was thinking. Kat was taller than me. My head ended where her chin began. The last shot was the one I'd taken. It had gone wrong. Instead of the London Eye, I had snapped some legs and headless bodies of the people near where we'd been queuing. I arranged the photos on my desk alongside the souvenir shot of the capsule in which we thought Salim had been a passenger and the list of theories. We sat in silence. Kat breathed out long and hard. "I don't even know what I expected to find," she said, shuffling the pictures about. "I wish we'd just given Auntie Glo Salim's camera when we first found it. Now we'll have to explain why we didn't give it to her. And I bet when she sees Salim's last photo, she'll just start crying again." She picked up the shot of her and me on the footbridge and threw it down again. "A clue? As if." I picked up the photo. "Let's keep the photos and the camera safe in my room until Salim returns," I suggested. "If he returns," Kat said, biting her lip. She shook her head and swept all the photos into a rough pile. "But I agree. There's no point upsetting Auntie Glo. You don't have to lie, Ted. Just say nothing." Then Kat picked up the list of theories. "As for this," she scrunched it up and threw it in the waste paper basket. "It's beyond us, Ted." I watched the paper crackle softly, as if it was trying to reopen itself. When the corners reappeared, I took it back out of the rubbish and smoothed it flat on the desk. "Forget it, Ted," Kat said. I picked up a pen. "Let's try a process of elimination," I said. The world's most famous fictional detective, Sherlock Holmes, said that once you have eliminated all the possibilities, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true. I was eager to see if we could eliminate all the theories except my favorite theory of all, which was that Salim had spontaneously combusted. This would not have been a good outcome for Aunt Gloria or Salim, but it would mean that spontaneous combustion was a real phenomenon, and my discovering this would have been an advance in science. "Theories 1 and 8 can go," I began. "Today we have proved that Salim couldn't have stayed in the capsule after it came down, and he couldn't have come out hiding under somebody else's clothes." I crossed them out. "Drop it, Ted." "That leaves 6. While you're at it, you can cross off the one about spontaneous explosion or whatever it's called." "Theory number 5? Yeah, and the time warp one." "Number 7? My pencil hovered over the list. "But supposing we eliminate all the others and—" "Oh, grow up, Ted." I wished Kat would spontaneously combust there and then, but she didn't. Her eyebrows came close together, and her lips were right down, and then a tear came rolling out of her left eye and down her nose. I thought of something I hadn't thought of before. Very slowly, I drew a wavy line through theories 5 and 7, even though a strange feeling went up my esophagus. Done, I said. Kat picked up the list as if she was interested again. She brushed off the tear. That leaves 4 theories, she said. 2, 3, 4, and 6. And 9, I said, remembering. 9? The 9th theory is the one I was going to tell you about last night, I reminded her. When the phone rang, you never wrote it down. She took the pen from me. You never told me what it was. Out with it, Ted. It had better be good. It is. I started dictating. The 9th theory is that Salim never got on the eye in the first place. Kat got halfway through writing the words, then stopped, and said it was daft, and I said it wasn't, and she said, hadn't we seen him get on? And I said we had seen what we thought was Salim, but it was just a shadow, and it could have been anyone. He turned and waved, Kat said. Lots of people might have done that, I said. Not just Salim. But what happened to Salim then, between when we said goodbye and when he got to the top of the ramp? I had not considered this. He might have stopped to do up his trainers and decided not to get on after all, and come back down the ramp after we moved away. And then he might have looked for us, but we'd vanished into the crowds. And then he might have got lost or run away or got kidnapped. Kat closed her eyes. Okay, Ted. I'm reliving the moment. I shut my eyes too, but all I could see was the wrong way round Z, and a line of boys, all Salim lookalikes, smiling and waving, and saying goodbye, and walking to the edge of a precipice. Ted, Kat said. I opened my eyes. I have to admit, it's a clever theory. A good tingling feeling went from my esophagus up to my scalp. I smiled. But it's wrong, Ted. I stopped smiling. Wrong? I don't expect you to understand. The boy who waved from the top of the ramp, the way he stood and looked back, the way he turned and walked on, it was Salim. I just know. You just know? It's a body language thing. The good feeling I had turned bad. Body language is a form of communication, like speaking English or French or Chinese, but it has no words, only gestures. Humans and chimpanzees and meerkats and stingrays can read body language by instinct without having to learn it. But according to the doctors who diagnosed me, people with my kind of syndrome can't. We have to learn it like a foreign language, and this takes time. You mean you saw something about the boy who waved that I didn't? Yes, Ted. Kat's voice was soft. She put a hand on my shoulder, which made the hairs on my neck stick up. Trust me, it was Salim we saw. It just was. I took the pencil back from Kat and crossed off what she'd written for Theory 9. I crossed it out 3 times over. I'd thought it the best theory of all until then. Now it was dead, almost at birth. Dead as a dodo, you could say. Chapter 19. The Boy on the Train. Mum came in and Kat sat on the desk on top of the photos in the theory list. Hi, guys, Mum said. Hi, Mum, said Kat. She swung her legs backwards and forwards and stared into space. This isn't much of a half-term for you, is it? Don't worry, Mum, we're fine. Mum smiled. Then she said the police were visiting us again and we should go downstairs in case they wanted to ask us anything. Then she went out and Kat got off the desk. She hid the theory list and the photographs in the little drawer under my desk. Then she picked up the souvenir picture and said that she'd hand it over to the police, just in case it was of some use. Then she went out of my room. I reopened the drawer. I found my favorite photo, the one Salim had taken of Kat and me on the footbridge. It looked as if a corner of the London Eye was emerging from my shoulder. Then I put it in my book of weather systems between cyclones and anticyclones where it would be safe. Then I followed Kat downstairs. Soon the police car drew up and Mum and Aunt Gloria took the same places on the sofa, and Dad showed in Detective Inspector Pierce, who was on her own. She sat on the same chair as yesterday. Nobody said anything for a minute. Then Kat went up to her and offered her the souvenir photograph. "I'm sorry we didn't give it to you sooner," Kat said. "I meant to yesterday, but we forgot, didn't we, Ted?" I said. Detective Inspector Pierce took the photo and shook her head and smiled. "We already have that one, Kat," she said, "along with 64 others, but thanks anyway." Aunt Gloria grabbed the photograph and peered at it. "What is this?" "It's a picture of the people in the pod, Aunt Gloria," I explained. "The pod that not a trace of Salim in any of them, I'm afraid," Detective Inspector Pierce said. "Nor in the CCTV footage. I've been checking much of it myself. In that particular pod, a rather large gentleman," she leaned over and pointed to the big white-haired man in the raincoat, "stood in the same spot for nearly the whole ride and blocked much of the camera's view." Aunt Gloria tossed the picture down on the floor near my feet. I picked it up. "You know what I think?" she said. "I think he never went up that damn wheel in the first place." "That's an interesting theory, Aunt Gloria," I said, "and one that I considered too, but—" "Ted," Mum said. She put a finger to her lip. That is body language even I have learned to read. It means be quiet. There was another silence. Then the inspector said she had a possible lead. A boy matching Salim's description had been seen at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon by a guard at Euston Station, dodging the ticket barrier and getting on a train just a moment before the doors were locked. "A train? What train?" Aunt Gloria said. "An inner-city train between London and Manchester." "Manchester? But that's where we'd just come from. Why would Salim go back there?" "The boy, if it was Salim, was on his own. Unfortunately, that's where we lose sight of him. The guard on the train has no memory of him. He could have got off at any of the stops in between, but the Manchester police are checking to see if Salim is perhaps in Manchester." "With his dad," Aunt Gloria said. "He is not with his father, I'm afraid. It was the first place we looked." The inspector produced Salim's address book. "We've spoken to everybody you told us he was close to. His cousins Ramesh and Yasmin, your neighbors the Tysons, his school friend Marcus Flood, and his old friend from primary school, Paul Burridge. And? None of them say they've heard from him since you left the day before yesterday." I said. "That's—" "Hush, Ted," said Mum. "If Salim did go to Manchester," Detective Inspector Pierce said to Aunt Gloria, "where do you think he'd be most likely to go?" Aunt Gloria stared into the space in front of her and then sighed. "I don't think," she said. "Sorry?" "I think the boy on the train is like the boy last night, the boy in the morgue. The boy you thought was Salim and wasn't." Detective Inspector Pierce reached over and touched Aunt Gloria's hand. "I'm sincerely sorry about that, Gloria. We didn't have a proper photo ID then. We do now." From a brown envelope she'd been holding, she took out a photo of Salim and showed it to us. "Your ex-husband gave us this. Would you say it's a good likeness?" Salim was in a school blazer with a sweatshirt underneath and a faint line of a mustache over his lips. He was not looking either happy or sad in the photograph because his lips were straight, neither up nor down. "That's him," Aunt Gloria whispered. "I bought 2 copies so that Salim could give one to his father, to Rashid. I do it every year. I don't know why. I don't even know if Rashid has them framed. I don't—" The doorbell rang. Dad went into the hall to see who it was, and I heard voices, and then in walked a tall Indian man in jeans and a green shirt. "Speak of the devil," Aunt Gloria hissed. I only heard her say this because I was standing next to her. I didn't see anything particularly satanic about the strange man. I thought he must be another plainclothes police officer. My hand flapped. "What's this?" the man said. "Have you found my son?" He looked at Aunt Gloria. She looked at him. "What are you doing here?"
I'm looking for my son. What else? Trust you to lose him.
Maybe Satan had entered the room after all, because everybody started talking very loudly. I put my hands over my ears, but I could still hear them. I counted the people in the room. 7. I tried to guess the ages of those I didn't know. Then I added the ages, actual or approximate, of all present. When I arrived at the figure of 233 and worked out the average age was 33.3 recurring, everyone was still shouting their heads off. The difference between laughing your head off and shouting your head off is that with one you are happy and with the other you are angry. I like it much better when people are laughing their heads off. Detective Inspector Pierce got up from her chair. "I'd better go," she said. But I'm not sure that anyone listened except for me and Dad, who had not joined in the shouting either. Dad showed her out to the hallway and I followed. You could still hear the raised voices in the living room. "Goodbye, Mr. Spark," Detective Inspector Pierce said. "I'm sorry again about last night." I felt Dad's arm on my shoulder tighten.
Will you find out who that poor boy was?
"We're working on it," Inspector Pierce said. "And as for Salim, when everyone's calmed down, can you ask them if they would agree to us calling in the press?"
The press?
"Yes, if Salim's picture gets into the news stories, somebody who's seen him might come forward." Dad nodded.
I'll ask them.
"Inspector Pierce," I said, my hand flapped. "Salim got a call on his mobile yesterday at approximately 10:50 a.m. He said it was from a friend calling from Manchester to say goodbye." "Did he? How interesting." She smiled at me, which meant she and I could be friends. "If only some of my officers had half your brains, Ted." Then she nodded and walked down the tiny garden path to where the police car was parked. Dad and I went back to the living room. Rashid was saying that the police had burst into his busy evening surgery last night, and that all his patients must have thought he was another Dr. Death, which was the name newspaper editors gave to a very evil doctor who killed dozens of his patients instead of making them better for no reason other than that he liked doing this. Aunt Gloria was clinging to a cushion as if she was about to throw it at him, and saying that all he ever cared about was what other people thought about him. Mum was standing up and holding Kat by the elbow and ushering us back into the hallway. She closed the living room door behind her. "God almighty, let's leave them to it," she said. "Let's go get a pizza for pity's sake." So we did. Pity must have been pleased because we had 4 enormous pizzas at the pizza restaurant nearby. I had a Coca-Cola, and Kat had a Sprite, and Mum had a beer, and Dad had a bottle of sparkling water. Dad and I ate all of ours, and Mum and Kat swapped their last slice and left only bits of the crust, which meant that everybody had been extremely hungry. And over the meal we did not talk about Salim. I talked about thunderstorms and why they happen, and Kat showed Dad how she had removed the silver nail polish from her hands, and he said he was glad Catwoman had gone back to the moon. When we got back, Rashid and Aunt Gloria were sitting on the sofa together, arm in arm. This puzzled me until I remembered what Mum says about Kat and me having a love-hate relationship, and I worked out that the same was true of Rashid and Aunt Gloria. Mum said to Rashid he was welcome to sleep on the couch if he wanted to, and he said, was she sure? And she said she was, and he said she was most kind and he would. And then Kat and I were told to go upstairs to bed, so we did. Chapter 20. Eavesdropping. Kat curled up on the lilo and went to sleep. The house went quiet. Kat made a funny lapping noise, like a dog drinking water. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of Salim, seeing his face with his lips turned up, fading in and out of the spokes of the London Eye. Then I remembered him saying I looked a cool dude and telling me that he got lonely. The boy on the slab, the boy on the train, Salim or not Salim. I switched on the desk light. Kat didn't wake. She just moaned and turned over. I got my weather system book off my desk and looked at the photo of Kat and me on the bridge as taken by Salim. I don't know much about photos, but I could see it was a good photo, not like the kind I take, because the lines around our faces were sharp, and we were exactly in the middle of the shot. A small strip of the eye's wheel came up from my shoulder, with 7 of the 32 pods shining in the sunlight. I put the photo back in its hiding place, between the chapters on cyclones and anticyclones. I thought, cyclones go anti-clockwise, anticyclones go clockwise. That's if you're in the northern hemisphere. If you're in the southern hemisphere, it's the other way round. It's like water whirling down a plug hole. In the northern hemisphere, it whooshes anti-clockwise, in the south, clockwise. And I realized that the same is true of the London Eye. I'd always thought of it as going anti-clockwise. If you look at it from the south bank of the river, that's how it goes. But, a big but, if you look at it from the north bank, it goes clockwise. Whirlwinds and wheels, clockwise or anti-clockwise, depending on how you look at it. Nematodes, such as earthworms, male or female, depending on how you look at it. Then there's Dad's favorite saying, a glass, half empty or half full, depending on how you look at it. I scratched my head. Depending on how you look at it, the same object can be or do opposite things at once. I remembered a picture Kat had once shown me of a waterfall. Only the way it was painted, it looked as if the water was flowing upwards. Perhaps this was a clue to Salim's disappearance. Perhaps Kat and I were looking at things the wrong way up, or the wrong way round. I got excited then, because I am good at looking at things differently. When I was little, I once drew an egg as 3 rings, the shell, the white, and the yolk. It looked like the planet Saturn, and the teacher at school said it was a very unusual way to draw an egg. She said I had drawn it in cross-section, as if I had X-ray eyes and could see straight through it. I tried to look at Salim riding in his pod with X-ray eyes, but I could only see figures in the pod, dark shadows, turning to have their souvenir photo taken. So next I picked up the souvenir shot. After Aunt Gloria had tossed it on the floor earlier, and the police had said they didn't want it, I'd taken it back up to my desk. I studied the African women, the big white-haired man, the fat couple and their children, the Japanese tourists. All I could see of the girl in the pink jacket who'd stood near us in the queue was her arm, waving at the camera above the other people. I could not see her boyfriend, nor the tall blonde woman with the grey-haired man who was shorter than her. It had been a crowded pod. Not everyone had fitted into the picture. Salim might have been at the back somewhere, behind the shoulders and cluttered bodies. I tried to look in between the torsos with X-ray eyes. But it was grey, murky shadow, tiny dots, nothing more. I pushed it away. I got up and crept downstairs to the kitchen. I knew where Mum kept the salt and vinegar crisps hidden and I needed some. I took 2 packets out and crept back into the hallway. I paused. The living room door was ajar and I could hear Aunt Gloria's voice. I decided to listen in case there was a clue. Maybe Aunt Gloria knew something that she didn't realize she knew, but if I heard it, I would be able to see the significance. Mum has told me it is wrong to eavesdrop on people. Eavesdropping is a strange word. Eaves are the parts of roofs that project over walls. The only thing that drops from them is rainwater, and rainwater cannot hear. Kat eavesdrops all the time. She lurks in the hallway when Mum and Dad are talking about serious matters such as school reports, and if I tell her it is wrong to do this, she hisses at me to get lost. But tonight I decided to eavesdrop myself. I hate waiting, Aunt Gloria was saying.
I know you do.
It was Rashid.
Patience and you, they don't go.
We should call in the press, Rashid, like Inspector Pierce says.
Not yet, Gloria. I don't want our private affairs all over the place.
There you go again, always caring about what other people think. What does it matter? What matters is Salim.
Okay, Gloria. We'll call the press tomorrow, if Salim isn't found by then.
There was a pause. I heard a groan and the sofa creaking. I'd do anything just to know Salim was alive, somewhere, anywhere, unharmed, she said.
He is. Trust me. I feel it in my bones.
I hope your bones are right, said Aunt Gloria. Oh, Rashid, if he comes back safe, let's be in touch more. It hasn't been good for him, our never talking.
Why are you taking him to New York then? I nearly put an injunction on you.
You didn't.
I did. You never told me what you were planning. I only learned about it from Salim.
But I need the money, Rashid.
I pay you every month, don't I? As we agreed.
It's not enough. I need a good salary too.
Why? To pay for all your clothes?
The voices were getting louder again. I edged backwards towards the stairs.
You can rise up as far in your profession as you want, Aunt Gloria said. Why can't I? You're impossible, Gloria. You only ever think of yourself. That's a lie. I'm the one who looks after Salim day in, day out. He's lived with me all his life. He's mine. He goes where I go. Salim, Rashid said, is Salim. He doesn't belong to either of us.
There was a pause. I stood still. The sofa creaked again.
You're right, Aunt Gloria said. If anything happens to Salim, you say you'd never forgive me, but I'd never forgive myself.
Her voice wobbled as if she was going to cry. I crept up the first stair.
Don't blame yourself, Gloria,
Rashid said. Then I heard him groan.
Salim asked me something the last time he visited me.
What?
He asked if he could come live with me.
I don't believe it.
He did.
Never. Impossible.
I don't know if he meant it, but he did ask.
What did you say?
I said that I was too busy every day at the surgery, that he was better off with his mother, that he should go to New York. It was a fine city. I said no. I didn't even sit down to talk to him about it. He asked just as I was rushing out to a patient. I turned a deaf ear to him, Gloria.
Oh, Rashid, don't you start. I can't stand to see grown men cry. Rustles, chokes, sighs. Then I guessed what came next. My hair stood on end. They were kissing. From the sound of it, it was the long tongue like eels kind that Kat told me about a couple of years back. She says that they do it in movies when their cheeks move about, that they do it in the school corridors when the teachers aren't looking, that Mum and Dad do it when we're not looking. My mum threatens us with weird punishments sometimes. If I forget to change my school shirt 3 days running, she'll yank it off me, screech at the state of the collar, and threaten to hang me on the washing line by my toenails if I forget to change it next time. She's joking, you realize. But if you were to ask me, what would I prefer, being hung from a washing line by my toenails or having to be kissed by somebody like Aunt Gloria, I know which I would choose. The washing line, every time. I fled upstairs as fast as I could. I'd had enough eavesdropping for one night.